Revenge with Karen.
I don't owe you a bonus for paperwork, he said, smirking like he just solved world hunger with a spreadsheet. That was the exact moment I felt the floor tilt beneath me, not from surprise, but from the sheer velocity with which my patience exited the building. Derek, our new manager with a LinkedIn smile and all the depth of a microwaved lasagna, had been in the job for 6 weeks. 6 weeks, long enough to memorize his own extension, and short enough to not know what the hell anyone actually did around here. And apparently, not long enough to understand that I was the one quietly keeping this company from being eaten alive by auditors in a high-visibility, low-glory role called compliance. I just blinked when he said it. Didn't argue. Didn't point to the 8 years of spotless audit results, the risk logs I updated daily, or the countless times I'd flagged issues before they hit the fan. Instead, I said okay, and walked out of his office feeling like someone had just tried to mug me with a foam pool noodle. But I wasn't numb. Oh no. I was cataloging every moment, every word, every receipt. By the way, if you're still listening and haven't hit subscribe or like yet, take a second. Most folks forget, but it really helps the team keep these stories rolling. Plus, let's be real. Already hooked. Might as well make it official. Now, back to Derek, a man who thought my job was printing certificates and moving files around like some kind of glorified office librarian. He rolled into our department with his efficiency protocols and restructuring memos, and within 2 weeks had cut half the documentation review cycle without realizing why we did it that way in the first place. I watched him delete internal flags from a spreadsheet once because red makes people nervous. He didn't ask questions. He made assumptions. Assumptions like, Jennifer handles compliance, so she must be junior. Jennifer sits quietly during meetings, so she must not understand the business. Jennifer doesn't interrupt, so she must not have anything to say. What he missed was the mountain of documents, regulations, and contract clauses that I not only managed, I wrote half of them, including the internal protocols tied to a multi-hundred-million-dollar client account. But hey, what's $287 million between friends? The cherry on top came during bonus season. Now, let's not pretend compliance folks are ever showered in stock options and champagne. But you expect something. A token. A hey, thanks for keeping us out of prison this year. Instead, I got an auto-generated HR email at 11:48 p.m. on a Thursday. This year, your bonus amount is $0.00. No explanation, no conversation. Just a line in my pay stub that said I was worth exactly as much as the paper I printed. So I went to Derek's office the next morning. I wasn't angry, not visibly. I asked, politely, if there had been a mistake. He leaned back, placed his fingers behind his head like he was on a beach in Malibu, and gave me that smile. You know the one. The I'm about to say something stupid with confidence smile. And then he dropped the line, I don't owe you a bonus for paperwork. I should have left it there. I should have walked out. But something in me, maybe pride, maybe just disbelief, asked one more question. So, what would you say it is I do here? He blinked, stared at me, then said, honestly, don't really know. Some kind of regulatory checklist thing? 8 years, 8 damn years, of building, certifying, tracking, and enforcing the protocols that kept our most sensitive accounts certified. And this clown couldn't even describe it without using the word thing. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't write a long email with bullet points and accomplishments. I just said, thanks for the clarity, and left. But something inside had shifted. It was the moment the fuse lit. He thought he'd won. He thought he buried me under a $0 insult. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I was still listed as the designated officer on our highest value compliance certificate, the one tied directly to our $287 million client contract, and I wasn't planning to say a single word about it. Derek hit the ground sprinting like a toddler in Dad's shoes, loud, unbalanced, headed straight for a faceplint. His first order of business? Streamlining, which, in Derek speak, meant gutting the processes he didn't understand and redistributing responsibilities like he was dealing cards at a drunken casino night. He moved sensitive tasks to interns, cut approval chains in half, and used phrases like we need to break silos, while deleting entire folders labeled regulatory escalation protocols, turned our once bulletproof compliance workflows into a spaghetti buffet of unchecked boxes and broken links. And through it all, he operated under one very stupid, very fatal assumption, that I'd keep doing what I'd always done, quietly sweeping behind him with a mop and a legal binder, fixing what he wrecked without needing to be asked or thanked. To be fair, I did keep cleaning up for about 6 days. Then I stopped. No announcement. No drama. Just silence. I started documenting instead. Every decision he made, logged. Every deleted checkpoint, archived. Every time he approved something out of process or bypassed policy because it's just paperwork, screenshot, timestamp, cloud folder, external drive, offsite backup. I didn't tell anyone I was building the most detailed case study in corporate malpractice this company would ever see. I just smiled when he bragged about shaving down the red tape and nodded politely when he told me to lean in more during stand-ups. He didn't notice I wasn't following up like I used to. Or if he did, he assumed I'd catch up eventually. That's the thing about guys like Derek. They don't notice support systems, only spotlights. He assumed if the ship was still floating, he must be the captain. Then he made it official. One morning, Char forwarded a memo from Derek's office that said I'd been reclassified as an associate compliance analyst. Not senior, not manager, associate. My responsibilities were now project-based and non-essential to certification workflows. The man basically fired me by demotion, but kept my body on site in case the copy machine jammed. The violation stung, not because of the title. I didn't need 3 syllables and a hyphen to know my worth. It stung because he didn't even ask what I did, didn't ask what systems I touched, didn't even pretend to investigate what responsibilities might have been entangled in that role. He saw a quiet woman in her 40s who didn't self-promote and assumed I was just filler. But something funny happened after that memo. I felt lighter, untethered. He'd erased me, but in doing so, he also unshackled me from responsibility. I wasn't on the org chart anymore. I wasn't on the meeting invites. I wasn't CC'd, looped in, or consulted, which meant I wasn't liable either. And that, my friend, is where the real story begins. Because while Derek was slicing through our department like a machete in a jungle, there was one small line of text buried deep in the company system. A line he never updated. See, in all his noise, all his declarations of new leadership, he forgot to check the compliance systems, ones not visible in his dashboards. Specifically, the platform that tracked designated officers on active client certifications. And guess who was still listed? Yours truly. Jennifer Ann Moore, designated officer for our largest client's compliance certificate. A $287 million contract tied directly to my name, my login, my sign-off. But Derek didn't know that, and I wasn't going to remind him. I started cleaning up my desk, not because I was fired, but because I had mentally moved on. I still did my assigned tasks. I still logged my hours, but emotionally, I had already left the building. I was a ghost with a clipboard, floating through a company that didn't know it had made itself vulnerable. He'd cut me out, and in doing so, made me invisible. But invisible doesn't mean powerless. It means untraceable. I didn't storm out. I didn't even sigh. Just opened a new Chrome tab one evening and typed regulatory compliance jobs remote. The results glowed like headlights through fog. Every opening I saw felt like a secret door out of a burning theater. Quiet, dignified, and best of all, not managed by a man who thought compliance was optional if you smile hard enough. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. There's a difference. Every morning for the next 2 weeks, I came in exactly on time, or my company badge like armor, and finished what I knew would be my final contributions to a firm that had no clue it was bleeding internally. I completed one last internal audit cycle, flagged 7 outstanding documentation gaps, and noted 3 critical deadlines that were floating like landmines no one else knew to defuse. I included it all in a comprehensive report I named, Without Irony, Risk Landscape Post-Transition, Q3. Sent it directly to Derek. Subject line, pending items before handover. The timestamp said 8:03 a.m., Tuesday. By 8:11, he'd marked it as read, and by 8:12, it was forgotten. No reply, no acknowledgement, not even a thanks. Just another ping lost in the digital void of a man too busy updating his LinkedIn with transformational leader to notice the tripwire beneath his feet. Fine. I moved in silence after that. I downloaded my personal files from my work laptop, recipes, a folder of funny dog gifs, a half-written resignation letter saved as grocery list 2023. DocX. I cleared my desk drawer, 2 pens, 1 dead succulent, and a granola bar from the Obama administration, all tossed or packed. Then, I did what Derek never imagined I'd do. I followed every single offboarding protocol to the letter. I cataloged all system credentials, printed out logs, and labeled folders in plain language. No booby traps, no sabotage. Just a paper trail so obvious it could survive a toddler with a crayon. But I didn't recertify anything. That's the part no one caught. See, in compliance, updates aren't automatic. A designated officer has to formally pass the baton, sign off, submit credentials, update certifications. Otherwise, the system keeps flagging the original certifier as active. Eric never asked me to do it. HR never reminded me. Legal never followed up, so I didn't. Not out of malice, out of exactness. I wasn't the villain here. I just wasn't the janitor anymore. At 9 a.m. sharp on Friday, I sent a short note to HR. Dear team, please accept this letter as formal notice of my resignation, effective immediately. I've completed all offboarding steps per the employee handbook. Wishing you continued success. Best, Jennifer Moore. No dramatic quotes. No you'll miss me. Just facts, protocol, and peace. HR replied 12 minutes later with a generic message thanking me for my contributions. They asked for feedback on my experience. I declined. They said my account would be deactivated by EOD. I logged out before they could. And just like that, I was gone. No farewell lunch. No balloons. No half-hearted e-card with the wrong spelling of my name. Just one empty chair in an office where no one thought to ask what I took with me, or more importantly, what I left behind. Because while I'd walked out the front door, my name was still sitting quietly inside the company's most important compliance file, blinking red, waiting to expire. I didn't sabotage a damn thing. I just didn't save them. Derek swaggered into his own legend like a man starring in a movie only he was watching. In team meetings, started name-dropping buzzwords like lean ops and regulatory agility, phrases he clearly Frankensteined from a podcast and a cereal box. He told anyone who'd listen that the compliance team had been clogged with legacy overhead and that his changes were redefining the department, which was rich, considering the only thing he'd redefined was how fast you could dismantle 8 years of institutional memory with a smile and a PowerPoint. Held a presentation 2 weeks after I left where he literally included a slide titled New Compliance Vision that featured a stock photo of a man looking at clouds. He said it represented clarity. In that room were 5 executives, 2 directors, and 0 people who knew what a designated officer was. No one questioned the silence coming from my desk. No one poked at my auto-reply that read, Jennifer Moore is no longer with the company. For compliance inquiries, please contact Derek Sanderson at CompanyCom. He was CC'd on every reply. I can only imagine the inbox that started building behind him, questions he didn't know he was responsible for, warnings he didn't understand, gentle pings from auditors escalating into formal requests. I watched it all from a distance, sipping tea on a balcony in Maine during my between jobs break. Every now and then, I checked my old clients' public portals, not accessing anything internal, just seeing what was visible to the public. And there it was. A new audit cycle had kicked off at the $287 million client. One of their internal audit teams had formally requested updated documentation, including renewed compliance certificates. That request was sent, per standard process, to the email listed as certification contact in our compliance registry. Guess whose name and email were still on the file? They didn't get a reply from me, obviously. Instead, they followed protocol and escalated to the next contact, the department head listed on record, Derek. I wasn't in the room, but I know exactly how he responded, with bravado, with confidence, with all the sincerity of a guy caught speeding who says he wasn't aware of the limit. He probably told them the renewal was in progress, probably claimed there was a transition underway. Maybe he even offered to hop on a call to walk them through the improvements. What he didn't realize was that there wasn't a renewal in progress. Because in order to renew, someone had to log into the CERT system with the correct credentials, verify the completion of all mandatory internal checkpoints, revalidate the officer assignment, and issue a formal sign-off with time-stamped confirmation. None of that had been done. None of it could be done, because Derek didn't have the keys, and he never thought to ask where they were. From my place on the outside, I watched the gears begin to seize. Not suddenly, just quietly, like a watch winding down. I could see the signs, follow-up requests turning into formal reminders, deadlines shifting from soft to non-negotiable, language in audit notices shifting from friendly to firm. The most dangerous thing in compliance isn't malice. It's ignorance with access. Derek had both in abundance. Meanwhile, I was interviewing with firms that actually understood what I brought to the table. Firms where risk mitigation wasn't a dirty word, and where bonuses didn't hinge on whether your job could be pitched in under 30 seconds to someone who thought Sarbanes-Oxley was a shoe brand. I had one eye on my future, and one on the ticking clock Derek didn't know existed. The certificate had a 30-day renewal window. It was on day 26. The email hit their inbox at 7:42 a.m. Subject line in all caps, urgent, certificate expiration notice. By 7:44, it had been forwarded to Derek by his assistant with the note, "Look serious." "Want me to reply?" Derek, hungover from his third celebratory dinner in a week, tapped back, "No worries. I got this." He did not, in fact, got this. At 9 o'clock sharp, client's external auditor called an emergency meeting. No preamble, no small talk. Just a calendar invite with the subject certification, lapse contract implications. Attendance mandatory. The boardroom filled slowly. Legal sat on one side, procurement on the other. Derek walked in late, holding a protein smoothie and a half-tucked shirt, all fake confidence and surface-level charm. So he started, just a little compliance hiccup. The auditor, man named Greenwald, known for never blinking and never laughing, didn't even look up from his folder. "I'll begin," he said. He placed a printed document at the center of the table. It was the compliance certificate tied to the $287 million contract. Everyone leaned forward. Expiration date, 3 days ago. Certifying officer, Jennifer Ann Moore. Status, expired officer inactive. No renewal filed. No reassignment processed. No documentation in transit. Greenwald looked around the room, then met Derek's eyes like a judge awaiting a confession. "Our protocol," he said slowly, "requires active, certified oversight for high-risk vendor relationships. This certificate governs risk exposure thresholds, liability coverage, and access protocols for core systems." Derek swallowed visibly. This must be an IT issue. Probably a lag in the system. Greenwald didn't move. "Contacted your IT department before scheduling this meeting." He opened another folder. They confirmed no updates have been made to this file since August. "The system reflects real-time inputs. This is not a lag. Someone from legal shifted in their seat. Procurement scribbled something fast in a notebook." Derek's ears turned red. Then Greenwald held up the certificate with 2 fingers like it was evidence in a trial. He read aloud, "Slow and deliberate, designated officer, Jennifer Ann Moore." He looked at Derek. "Miss Moore is no longer with your company, correct?" Derek fumbled. Yeah, but she was supposed to transition those responsibilities." Greenwald raised an eyebrow. "According to your HR logs, she resigned without reassignment. There is no documented transition, no updated officer signature, no submitted renewal request." A pause, long enough for everyone to hear the air conditioning click on. Then Greenwald slid the expired certificate across the table, paper whispering like a scalpel against wood. It stopped in front of Derek. "Explain." Derek stared at the paper like it might burst into flames. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I delegated those updates to the team." "Which team?" Greenwald asked. Another pause. Finally, Derek leaned back, eyes darting, sweat blooming beneath his collar. "I'll need to check with IT again, and possibly HR. There was some overlap." Greenwald folded his hands. "This contract is now in review. All scheduled disbursements are frozen pending internal and external investigation." Across the table, the CFO's pen stopped mid-sentence. The head of legal whispered something into her phone and immediately left the room. Procurement's lead leaned back and said flatly, "This affects the entire Q4 forecast." Derek looked around like a man waking up mid-drowning. "We can fix this," he said, voice brittle. Greenwald stood. "We hope so. But until then, your organization is in breach. You'll receive formal notice by end of day." And with that, he left. In the silence that followed, no one moved. Derek reached for his phone. He typed Jennifer Moore into his contacts. Her number had been disconnected. He tried her email. Auto reply, no longer with the company. He stared at the screen, the certificate still in front of him like a gravestone. For the first time since he walked into the company, Derek had no words. The freeze order came in at 3:12 p.m. sharp. 1 sentence, 5 words, CC'd to legal, procurement, and the CFO, all activity paused. Pending review. No exclamation points. No elaboration, just the sound of $287 million turning to ice. Procurement was the first to react. You could hear it, phones ringing, chairs scraping, a voice echoing from a side office, all vendor approvals on hold. Do not move forward on anything. A junior buyer nearly cried because she just greenlit $1 million tooling order tied directly to that contract. Legal was next. Their email hit the entire exec channel within minutes. Subject line, urgent exposure risk/certificate breach. The body of the message included words like noncompliance liability and material misrepresentation, phrases that, in our world, are the corporate equivalent of the buildings on fire and the exits are bricked over. By 4 o'clock, the board had been looped in. By 4:06, a private thread between the CFO, general counsel, and the CEO's chief of staff had begun quietly digging into who exactly was responsible for maintaining the certification log. Spoiler, there was one name, one login, one person who had ever been listed as designated officer for that particular client's compliance documentation. Me, Jennifer Ann Moore. And I was currently sitting at a sunlit cafe 30 miles away, halfway through a blueberry muffin, reviewing onboarding paperwork from a competitor who had offered me double my previous salary, a remote schedule, a welcome package that included stock, not Starbucks points. My phone buzzed. Derek S. Incoming call. I let it ring. No voicemail, just one text, desperate and naked. We need to talk, please. I closed the screen, took a sip of tea, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled, not out of spite, but out of relief. They finally saw it. The scaffolding they thought was decoration had been load-bearing this entire time. Back at the office, panic was morphing into paralysis. Someone in HR, bless their duct tape and bubblegum approach, tried to backdate a certification renewal form. But the system required biometric confirmation from the original officer to validate the update. That meant my login credentials, my signature, and my multi-factor authentication code. They had none of it. Worse, couldn't even create a new officer designation without confirming the previous one had been formally offboarded, which of course had never happened. My departure email was acknowledged, but nothing had been refiled. No update had gone through. No flags were raised, because Derek never checked. Someone asked if they could just replace me in the system. IT laughed, out loud. In the meeting, turns out you can't override a compliance cert tied to an active, high-risk contract without triggering an automatic review audit, which they now had. In triplicate, legal asked for a copy of Derek's transition plan. There wasn't one. The CFO asked how many other certificates might still list me. Silence. Derek called again. I put my phone on silent. I wasn't angry anymore. That ship had sailed somewhere between the demotion memo and the $0 bonus. But what I felt now wasn't vengeance, it was proof. My work had mattered. My precision hadn't been overkill. The hours I spent chasing down unlogged access changes and overlooked subclauses weren't just busy work. They were why things hadn't collapsed earlier. And now, I wasn't going to clean it up. The most ironic part, if Derek had just asked, politely, directly, I might have helped. Instead, he tried to cut me out like a skin tag. Thought I was excess. Replaceable. You can't replace a foundation mid-storm and expect the house to stand. So I watched from a distance as the roof began to cave in. The email arrived like a drunk apology at 2:04 a.m. Subject line, quick touch base. Inside, Derek had written, "Hey Jennifer, wondering if you'd be open to a short consult regarding the certificate process. No big ask, just a little guidance. Totally understand if you're busy. Would love to connect." He added a smiley face. A smiley face. This was the same man who couldn't name a single compliance checkpoint 3 weeks ago. The same man who told an entire floor I was basically a glorified notary. I didn't respond. I just forwarded the email to my lawyer with a simple note. This is the guy who called my job paperwork. Do with it what you will. Within the hour, my lawyer drafted a response. Cool, clinical, expensive sounding. Ms. Moore is not available for consulting at this time. Please direct any further requests to legal counsel. Any attempt to solicit her involvement without a formal agreement will be considered a breach of professional boundaries. I didn't even have to press send. My attorney did it for me. One less thing for me to think about between welcome lunches and the ergonomic chair fitting my new firm insisted on providing. Back at my former company, desperation was dripping through the air vents. The client had escalated things formally now. They weren't just asking about the certificate, they wanted the entire audit trail. Who signed what, when, and under what authorization? They demanded a verified chain of responsibility showing who had been accountable since my departure. Spoiler, no one. There was no new designated officer, no delegation of authority, no updated credentials, no recertification. Just a hole in the org chart shaped exactly like me. Legal started hounding HR. HR passed the buck to Derek. Derek, in turn, started rewriting the past in real time, digging through old Slack threads, forging half-baked memos, trying to stitch together something that looked like a transition plan. But it was too late. The client had already hired a third-party compliance firm to assess their vendor exposure. The firm asked for internal logs, metadata, access change reports, signed directives, every file with a missing signature, every timestamp that proved no one touched the compliance record since my departure. All roads led back to Derek. Worse, Greenwald, the auditor from hell, had started CCing the board directly on his correspondence. One of his notes read, "It is unclear whether your internal leadership understood the gravity of designated officer protocol." At this point, either the company acted in bad faith or it was gross negligence. Either way, the implication was clear. The board held an emergency meeting without the CEO, who was still sailing around the Amalfi Coast or wherever rich men go to cosplay relevance while the building burns. The CFO tried to dial him. No signal. Left a voicemail that began with "We've got a problem" and ended with "You need to get back now." Meanwhile, Derek tried one more time. This time, he called my new office. How he found the number, I don't know. Maybe he stalked LinkedIn. Maybe he begged IT to run a search. But the receptionist flagged it to me with a post-it that said, "Caller said it was urgent." Sounded sweaty. I chuckled, tore the note in half, and dropped it in the recycling bin. Then I turned back to my new workstation. Sunlight pouring through the window, real hardwood underfoot, my nameplate still gleaming from being unwrapped that morning. Full compliance team at my disposal. A boss who thanked me for catching a minor discrepancy during orientation. A CFO who actually asked my opinion before finalizing a new control framework. As Derek fumbled through self-inflicted chaos, I took another sip of my perfectly brewed coffee and smiled. Not because he was falling apart, but because I never needed to push him. He did it all on his own. The CEO's Gulfstream touched down just after dawn. His inbox, refreshed the second wheels hit tarmac, lit up like a pinball machine on meth. 117 missed messages, 9 urgent subject lines, 3 flagged voicemails labeled CEO only, and 1 Slack thread titled Jennifer Moore, immediate action required. The driver barely had time to close the door before he barked, headquarters. Fast. By the time he stormed into the glass-walled boardroom at 8:52 a.m., 3 people were already standing. The CFO, legal, Derek, pale, sweating, collar open like he'd tried and failed to loosen the noose he'd tied himself. Sitrep, the CEO, snapped, not even setting his phone down. The CFO didn't speak. She just handed him a single sheet of paper. Legal stared at the table. Derek stared at his shoes. The CEO scanned the certificate once, twice. Then out loud for all to hear, he read the name. Jennifer Ann Moore, designated officer. Expired. He looked up, and no one renewed this. No one answered. He turned to Derek. She left 5 weeks ago. What was your transition plan? Derek opened his mouth and produced one of the most catastrophic non-answers in corporate history. Well, I assumed IT would, I delegated most of that, and HR didn't flag it, so the CEO didn't blink. Just asked with terrifying calm, "Did you speak to Jennifer before she left?" Derek stammered. No, but she wasn't exactly communicative. After the reorg, she kind of just what? The CEO asked. I didn't think she was essential to what? The CEO's voice didn't rise. That was the worst part. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. The rage was subterranean, dense, pressurized. To compliance tied to a $287 million contract, a certificate that our largest client now considers a breach of trust. To a designation that's logged in every external system we use. Derek's mouth opened, closed, opened again. It was a budget issue, a beat of silence. Then the CEO asked the question that would haunt Derek forever. Please tell me you paid her. Derek's voice shriveled to a whisper. We reclassified her role. It wasn't considered revenue generating. The CEO slowly turned to legal. It's our exposure. Contract suspension, legal replied. External audit, formal review, potential reputational damage. If they pull the deal entirely, it'll trigger a cascading financial disclosure. Also, they've already begun shopping alternative vendors. The CEO nodded once, just once, like the prelude to a guillotine blade dropping. Then he looked back at Derek, whose face had gone ghost white. You cut her bonus. Yes, but you removed her from meetings. I thought it was strategic. You deleted her title, reassigned her workload, but left her name on the only certificate that mattered. Derek didn't answer. The CEO took a slow, steady breath. So you fired the one person who could have prevented this and didn't even bother to ask what she controlled. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to, the CEO said coldly. That was your job to know. The room was silent. The kind of silence that follows explosions, funerals, bankruptcy hearings. Outside, a bird hit the window and fluttered away. Inside, Derek looked like he wished he could do the same. Effective immediately, the CEO said, you are suspended pending review. Turn in your badge. Derek's voice cracked. Wait, can't we call her? The CEO narrowed his eyes. You had your chance. And just like that, Derek's reign of oblivious control ended with a single line of expired text, a forgotten name, a budget decision that cost them $287 million in frozen trust. Jennifer Moore, not a ghost, not a footnote. Just the fuse they didn't notice until the explosion hit. The contract was pulled at 10:37 a.m. on a Thursday. No calls, no final plea. Just a 2-line email from the client's legal team. Certification breach remains unresolved. We are terminating our agreement effective immediately, pending full re-audit. CFO read it out loud in the war room. No one moved. Forecast spreadsheets were dragged into trash bins. Q4 projections slashed. Stock prepped for a quiet Friday filing with language like unexpected vendor disruption and temporary compliance gap. Corporate poetry for we blew it. Investor relations scrambled to get ahead of it, but the market could smell panic. By end of day, shares had dipped 9%. By Monday, it was 14%. Procurement went silent. Legal, not so much. The internal investigation kicked off before lunch. HR was ordered to pull every transition document tied to compliance. Spoiler, there were none. Audit logs showed no delegation of authority. Every renewal document remained unsigned, untouched, expired. The one credentialed officer, me, had left 5 weeks earlier. All systems still listed me as active. All internal controls were flagged red. Derek was summoned, not to the boardroom, to legal. He emerged 40 minutes later with a white envelope, an empty ID badge clip, and eyes that looked like they'd seen the devil and realized the devil had better paperwork. Terminated for cause. No severance. No references. No appeals. The company-wide email announcing his departure used the phrase grateful for his contributions. Someone in IT leaked a screenshot of the actual termination reason in the system. Negligent mismanagement of high-risk contractual obligations. It trended on Slack for hours. I didn't gloat. I didn't post anything. I just went on with my new job, real desk, real team, real leadership. And then, one afternoon, 3 weeks after the implosion, a delivery guy walked into my new office lobby with a box. Jennifer Moore? I nodded, handed me a tall bouquet. White orchids, no card. Just a simple handwritten note taped to the wrapping. Thank you for your silence. No signature, no logo, just that. I stood there for a moment, smiling in disbelief. The only person who would send something like that was someone who realized, too late, that silence hadn't meant ignorance. It had meant strategy. Later that night, I opened my laptop and saw the alert from payroll. Deposit, signing bonus $47,000 and 0 cents. I leaned back in my chair. Read the number again. Not because I was surprised, it had been in my contract, but because it felt like punctuation. A clean, full stop at the end of a long, undervalued sentence. I whispered, not to anyone in particular, just into the soft hum of a quiet room. You don't owe me a bonus. I clicked open the receipt email. Let the numbers settle on the screen. But I kept the receipts anyway. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.